So your ordered list and your unordered list are your two most common types of list. And we see these here. The third type of list is not used as much, it's not seen as much, and a big part of the reason why it's not used and seen as much is because it is not supported by nearly as many of like your GUI editors or WYSIWYG editors. So WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. It's an acronym. So things like Dreamweaver, which I have here, I'm doing this in code view. If I did this in a design view, you can see how it kind of looks like it would by default. Now, this is a part of a file that gets loaded into other files. But as you go through this process, you have really easy ways to do ordered lists and unordered lists. You don't have them in a WYSIWYG editor like Dreamweaver. You don't have them nearly so well to do things like a definition list. If I come over here to insert, you'll see here's the unordered list and the ordered list, but definition list is not in here at all. You see the other things that we talked about, such as your header and navigation tags, your article and section, footers, all those types of things. Those are all there, but you still don't see a definition list. And I think that's a big part of the reason why it's not as prevalent is it's just not in tools. Not just Dreamweaver, there's a lot of other WYSIWYG tools that don't have that definition list. And that's a shame because a definition list has a lot of uses. Your definition list is made up of 3 sets of tags, however. So let me come down here and pull these in just to kind of show you these 3 tags. Now, it's going to start off the same way. We have a DL and a closing DL tag. And DL is going to stand for definition list. Okay? But each list item is actually made up of 2 parts. Okay, so each list item is made up of 2 separate parts. And if you think about what a definition is, like if you go to a dictionary and get a definition, you have a word or a term, and then you have your definition meaning, right? Well, this is sometimes referred to as a matched pair, and your definition or description list, sorry, I keep on calling it definition list. That's what it was in HTML4. And HTML5, they renamed it to be description list. So I keep on calling it definition list. I apologize. So you have your definition term, DT, and then you have it matched by a DD, description or definition description. So what it would look like is if you come here and say DT HTML5, then closing DT, then you can have DD and closing DD, you have something that looks like this. Now if I go to view this, view current file in Chrome, you can see here is HTML5, and down at the bottom this is a definition, okay? So the natural tendency is to think of this along the lines of something like, oh, I have a glossary and I need some terms to define as a glossary. And that's a great way to think of that. The description list was designed for stuff like that. But it has more than that just option. So this becomes something that's also very useful in things like maybe if I had an FAQ or a frequently asked questions. By having a frequently asked questions section, I can put the question as my DT and the answer as my DD. I can use HTML to style these and have them work correctly and easily with them. So let's take a look at how we use CSS to style something like this. Because right now, the only big difference is my description part is indented. And it's indented, that's nice, but it's the only thing that makes it stand out. I really want something a little bit more. So let's take a look at what we can do, just some common things. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do most of them on my DT because I want, if I'm using a like a glossary or dictionary type thing, if you look at the word that's being highlighted, it's usually larger or bold or something like that to make them stand out. So I can find that easy. And then once I've found my definition easily or my phrase easily, then I can move over to what my meaning is, and it's just right there. So I'm going to do that myself right now. And the first thing I do is I'm going to say margin top is, I'm going to say 15 pixels. I want some extra space. The next thing I'm going to do is I want my font weight to be bold. So my margin top is going to add some extra space between whatever's above it and the next item. That way it stands out a little bit easier. My font weight being bold is also going to make it larger and easier to see. So if I come here and reload it, you can see it's got a little bit extra space, and this is bold. If I come back, I'm going to now add another item. And I might have something like CSS3. We'll do JavaScript as another DT real quick, just so you can kind of see a couple of these. All right, now if I reload this, you can see each item has some spacing here. The DT is always indented, so the idea is I can easily grab my attention, see the term I'm looking for, and then I get a definition based upon that term or that phrase or whatever it is, which is why it works really well for something like an FAQ. I can make the font size just a little bit bigger if I want. So if I needed to say, hey, this is bigger, so it really stands out and catches the eye, almost like a heading 3 or something like that, I can do that. There's a lot of things I can do. Most of them you're going to notice I do with just my DT. I can, if I want to make it bigger, I just say font, size, if I can type today. So I'll say 1.2M, just to make it a little bit bigger. Once again, I can italicize my my DD tag if I want to, so that I can, it looks a little bit more cool. If I was using some JavaScript, I've seen examples where I will hide all of my DD tags, and then if you click on one of the DT tags, it will make the subsequent DD tag appear. And that's a little bit of JavaScript. You have to understand how the document object model works and how that process is handled. It's not that complicated, to be honest with you. It's a few lines of code. I think I wrote something like that in about 5 or 6 lines of code a dozen years ago. But it gives us some real power with how we want things to be. Typically, your order list and your unordered list items are going to be small. A few words. You usually will not see an order list or an unordered list that has something that's, a full paragraph or 3 or 4 lines or even a full line. They're usually just 3 or 4 words, if that, and they're short and concise. With your description list, especially with the DD tag, you are expecting more content. You're expecting to take up the full space, to have, a paragraph description or more. So that is not uncommon. And it should not be treated as uncommon because it just makes it work really well if you're using the right item for the right tool. And when we talk about using the right item or the right tool for the right job, let me give you an example of something I saw one time. So one time I saw where they were using a unordered list, and in the unordered list they had some terms that they were trying to convey. And they want people to know what the definition of these terms were. So they'd have a term and they had bold it, and then they put the definition beside it. But they're using a bolded list. It was just a bolded list. The description list was literally designed for something like that. And so that's why when we talk about people using the right tool for the right job or right tag for the right job, we're wanting them to understand that. There is an intrinsic and an inherent understanding between web developers, the browsers, and the search engines that things like your description list are meant to convey related pieces of information between those two tags. So one of the things that Google and the other major search engines, which right now is basically in the US is Google and Bing. If you go outside of the US, you have a few others. There's a Chinese search engine, Baidu. There's the Russian search engine, Yandex. There's a couple others out there. But what they are trying to do is they are working for what they call semantic understanding, and that is, can they put the words that they see in a web page into a contextual meaning? So can they say, hey, I understand that this phrase here or this word here and this description are related. And if they're related, then I can use them to maybe show if someone says, what is HTML5? This says something like, what is HTML5? They can say, oh, I have a definition or I have a description based upon that term. And so I can now show that. And if you've gone into Google in the last little bit, you've probably seen where it's tried to act as like a dictionary or thesaurus or something like that for you. And it's showing you, hey, here's a word, here's a definition, or if you ask for, what are 5 steps to do this? And it will show you, here's the 5 steps to do X, Y, Z. And so that's an understanding called semantic context, and where it's Google and its engine, the big programs that run behind the scenes are trying to understand it. When we use the appropriate HTML5 tags, when we use the appropriate list tags and things like that, this is all helping that process build upon each other one step after another to get the right information at the right time in the right places together so that it can provide better results directly to the user. And when it puts your website in the search results, it's trying to make sure that this is a good website to use and it's a valid website to use. So that's kind of why you would want to use your description list tag, is for those type of purposes. Any questions on that before we move on?
Oh. No.
Okay, excellent. then we'll keep on moving on just a little bit. Don't have much more to do. We are getting close to the end. You can see here, this was actually a screenshot where I talk about what each of the tags are. And if you look here, you can see the DL tag being used with your DT tags and DD tags and what this looks like. So then if we go in and work on describing them, and here I just, in this case, instead of saying a set fixed pixels, I said, let's make the margin 1M. An M, remember, is the size of a capital letter M. And so it's using, it's relative, it's based upon how big your font is, but it was also creating that spacing. Spacing is a good way to help define your visual representation. I have a whole video that I'm going to put out there for you guys. I'm going to create a link to it. I hope today. I've actually already created it that talks about how to use visual representation to make it easier for people to read and understand what you're trying to tell them. And so putting that visual spacing is a big help. I also went and did the font weight of bold, once again, just to make it stand out so it's easier to see and read. So this little CSS change, this once again is a screenshot, affected that change to make it just that big. You'll notice that there's very little spacing between your definition term and the preceding line. The idea was that my DD tag, which is right here, if it was only one sentence long, one line long, it's not going to wrap around, so it creates the separation. I find putting that extra top margin in, or margin dash top if you prefer, really helps to separate that and make that much, much better. So that's one of the big things, and the reason why that works is it goes back to something we talked about just a little bit earlier on in the class back when we were still in the library, which is your distance between elements shows a relationship or lack of relationship with other elements. So I want to keep all of my definition items grouped together, but I don't want them to be so close together that it's just one mass jumble of words. I need to have the separation and say this, and what we don't, the end user doesn't see, but what we would know as a DD tag moves closely to the DT tag, so there's that close relationship. These two belong together. You almost think of them as like puzzle pieces that go together. But here to here, these two are separated. They're related, but they're not interconnected. So they stand close, but not real close. They have a little bit of distance. That lets me know that they're related, they're similar, but that they don't necessarily directly go with one another. That helps my eye to catch those terms so I can look at them and I can find them faster and easier, and just makes for a greater user experience overall. The video, like I said, I'm going to post. I'm going to try to find that today and post that for you. I'm doing some other stuff. It also talks about how to use colors for the same type purpose, how to use sizing and positioning, and all those different things, and how we could do them in a very simple manner, but make them work together for that. So that's going to be a thing that's going to be coming up. You're going to see that. Next week, we are going to talk about images in the web page. So we've not done any images so far, and a lot of times I've not had anyone ask me about that yet, which is kind of surprising. Usually people want to jump right into that. And it's good to kind of give some other options so people don't go straight into and only want to do images, which is why I kind of pushed it off. But we will do images. Do all of you have Windows, or do some of you have Macintosh, or what type of computer systems are you guys using?
I have Macintosh.
You have Macintosh.
Windows.
You have Windows.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to show you guys a tool. I'll actually show you a couple tools. One that's Windows only, one that's free, one that's Macintosh or PC, but is a paid tool. I'll see if I can show you another one. I'll see if I can find one that will work on Mac that's free as well. And so what I need you to do though is if you could just bring like 2 images, one being a photograph type of image. It could be a photograph of yourself. It could be of a landscape. It could be of anything you want. Just need a photograph type of image. Usually this is going to be a JPEG image. And then we need something that is going to have some solid colors in it, like a bar chart or a cartoon or something like that. It's typically going to be a PNG or GIF type file. So we're going to talk about some of those files. We're going to talk about how they're used in a web page and how we can insert them into a web page and things like that. That will be part of our discussion for next week. So if you could, I'm going to send an email out just as a reminder about that later today, but that will be something else that we'll talk about as next week. So if you have those just so you kind of work with them, that would be really good. Okay. Any
Perfect.
questions about next week as far as that goes?
Yeah, where do we submit the pictures, the images?
You don't have to worry about submitting them. Just hang on to them so that if I get a chance to show you, or when I get a chance to show you how to work on editing them or changing them, I'll hopefully have a tool that you can use if you're on Mac, and I can show you how to do that. So that way you can kind of watch me do it, and then you can try to do it yourself and see if you're getting similar type results like I would expect you to,
Okay.
and that type of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? No? Okay. I am going to, there is a website review for next week. I'm going to tweak that just a little bit. So if you haven't done it yet, hold on to it. If you've already done it, don't worry about it. If you've already done it and submitted it, but if you haven't, there is going to be a minor tweak to it. I found something that was just kind of funny, bad type of website. And I want you guys to maybe review that and see if you can say, oh, this is what I would do to fix this and how to make this better and stuff. So we'll talk about that in the future. I'll put that in the description of the work, of the assignment work before. So like I say, if you've already done it and submitted it, I know a couple people have, you're ahead of schedule, you're fine, don't worry about it. But if you haven't done it yet, hang on, I'm making those changes later today. Okay?
Okay.
All right. That is basically what I have for today. So I appreciate you all coming. I know this has been a crazy time and with schedules and people having to travel and move and all type of stuff. So, but I appreciate you all guys making a good, strong effort to come. And like I said, look out for those changes. I'll be sending out an email about those changes, hopefully in the next half hour or so. And that'll give you some hints. Nothing that should be a problem or confused or anything like that, but just some things that you can kind of be looking at moving forward. And then we'll have a project which is coming up, I think, in like 2 weeks. We can talk about that next week as well, as you'll have more information based upon what you've been doing so far. And going forward, that will make that project pretty easy to work with. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you all. If you guys don't have any more questions, you guys can go ahead and sign off and have a little bit extra afternoon for yourself. I know this is usually like the last class of the day for most people. If you have questions, I'll be more than happy to stick around and answer them for you guys.